welcome. And for those of you around the country, good morning as well. We are hosting a webinar today on property and casualty insurance trends in the US. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And we hope that whatever part of the country you are in, you are enjoying the start of fall. Hi, I'm Mike Schiff, Managing Director of Client Development at Klingenstein Fields Advisors. And I'd like to welcome you today to our discussion on the evolving state of property and casualty insurance in the US with a spotlight on Florida. Joining me today is Scott Medley, Managing Principal of Private Client Services Division at Epic Insurance Brokers and Consultants, a team dedicated to working with individuals and families of substantial assets to identify and service traditional specialized insurance coverage options. When reviewing your property and casualty insurance policies, you may have noticed a jump in premiums each year. In fact, according to S&P Global Market Intelligence, insurance companies tried to increase homeowners' premiums by more than 11% in 2023, and auto insurance premiums rose even more. Contributing factors include inflation and the increased frequency and severity of natural disasters. For those living in high-risk states, such as Florida and California, the situation is even more challenging, with some underwriters reconsidering their willingness to issue policies in those states. There are, however, strategies you can implement to ensure your valuable assets, as Scott will soon discuss. During our discussion today, we will answer as many questions as we have time for, and any questions that we do not get to during the call, we will follow up with individually and address as best we can. You can ask your questions through the Q&A widget on the bottom of your screen. So before I turn the discussion over to Scott, I'd like to briefly introduce Klingenstein Fields Advisors to those who might be unfamiliar with our firm. KF Advisors is an independent SEC-registered advisor with offices in New York City and most recently, West Palm Beach, Florida. For over 30 years, we have been solely dedicated to helping individuals, families, and organizations achieve their legacy, philanthropic, and funding goals through customized wealth planning and investment management. We hope you will contact us with any questions you may have. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Scott Medley. Scott has over 15 years of experience in the insurance industry, a strong background in providing insurance solutions to highly successful individuals and families. He works with clients nationally to develop integrated insurance strategies and programs. Scott is going to discuss current trends in insurance, dig into what's driving premiums up, the outlook for insurance, a closer look at the Florida insurance market, what this means for you, and perhaps most importantly, what you can do to best insure your assets. Remember, you can ask your questions through the Q&A widget on your screen. Scott, welcome. Please take it away.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time. I know everyone wants to talk about insurance and is excited to be here just as I am. So thank you for your time. We'll make this not as painful as what we're experiencing in Florida, but kind of give a glimpse of what's got us here, what you can do as for your clients or for homeowners to help yourself. Just want to briefly tell my background. I specialize in the private client services of the business, handling homeowners, automobile, flood coverage, collectibles, excess liability. So this is my specialty. This is what I've been doing for 20 years in South Florida. I was born and raised here, so I know nothing else other than Florida and personal insurance, but really focusing on Florida. But I do work in all other 50 states. Obviously, Florida being one of the more challenging. So let's talk about Florida. I call this the price for paradise. So people have flocked here post-COVID, looking for lower income taxes, better weather, etc. But nationally, we've got the highest cost for home insurance. I think the national average is about $6,000 for Florida. That takes into account, of course, all homeowners. High net worth clientele obviously are paying a larger premium. We've got long-term net loss for insurance carriers. So looking back 10, 15 years, collectively, the insurance company or the insurance industry on a homeowner's basis has lost money in Florida. So really attracting new capital from these insurance carriers to come in and insure them has proven to be a bit more challenging. Uh, Reconstruction costs have risen. Just not only in going down to the last time, increased Florida population, those two combined has obviously caused insurance companies to have to insure more in Florida. So when we do have a catastrophe, the costs rise. Flood is a risk is higher. We live on flat land. Most are we're a peninsula here, so a majority of our Florida border is surrounded by water. One thing we learned from Hurricane Ian is that was majority a flood loss. Yes, there was windstorm losses, but the tidal surge that caused really was a majority of the damage. Insurance carriers' guidelines have tightened up, which means they are becoming more picky in what they insure and who they insure. So that's proved to be challenging. Limited options. So, with the guidelines tightening up, we have a supply and demand issue. We have more properties to insure, limited supply, so that increases premiums. And again, going back to the increased population, the amount of development that we've had in Florida has just been exponential. It was even, a lot of development before COVID, but post-COVID really accelerated that.
So Scott, before we jump into the meat of all this, you have a trivia question for our participants, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want everyone to go into the Q&A. We've got a trivia question. So looking from the decade from 2014 to 2023, how many $1 billion or greater weather events have affected Florida during that time period? And the bonus question is, what are the estimated total losses, meaning the total in dollar amount of those losses? So I'll give a minute or two for people if you want to add into the chat or the Q&A any of those guesses, and then I'll give the answer shortly. Okay, we got a guess of 12, so let's see if we can get at least a few more guesses. 7, 5 events, $9 billion, 16 events, 20. Okay, this is like Price is Right or the lottery. We're going up in amounts. Anybody else? I'll get 8 events, 25 billion, 8 events, 15 billion. Thank you, John, for that. Any others last minute? Thanks, Chris. 8 events, 25 billion. Okay, so I think I'm going to probably surprise everyone with this answer here. Answer is 37, totaling about $384 billion in losses. And now these are events that have affected Florida. They could have also affected other states. And the largest single event was in 2022, a Hurricane Ian, which was about $118 billion. Now, these aren't all insurable losses. These are just total losses between windstorm, flood, rain, etc. But the source is down below, and I can provide the link. But it's from the NOAA. So you can take that link and you can apply it to other states, other time periods. So I was actually surprised in that number. The last time I did this, I did it for a different time period. But yeah, we counted 37, totaling about 384 billion. So each event on average was 10 billion. But we obviously know, the largest single event was Ian. So that just gives you a glimpse of there's a lot of events that take place that we may not necessarily be affected by or may not be on the news. We have on the news right now, we've got a tropical cyclone 9 that's going to be turning into a hurricane. It's going to be hitting the inner panhandle on Wednesday or Thursday. So, that is getting news attention, but there's a lot of others that don't. So welcome to Florida. It's a crisis in the making. And I'm going to go through these 5 things that have been a contributing factor to the effects of the premiums that we see. Premium is the effect. It's not the cause. So one of those causes is assignment of benefits. Before legislation changed, in your policy, or actually even currently, in your policy, you can assign your benefits to a third party. Now, this is very insured friendly, meaning that if you have a second home in Florida and you have a claim and you have a contractor that you're working with, you can assign your benefits to the contractor. That way, you don't have to be the middle person dealing with that. The contractor can deal directly with the insurance carrier. In theory, that is a good thing. Gives the homeowner lots of flexibility. However, there's been a handful of contractors over the years that took advantage of this. They would have people sort of unknowingly or kind of give them a story, sign this document over, I'll handle everything. And really what happened is there's bits of fraud, lawsuits that were involved in that, where a contractor would go in and they would market to a whole community and say, hey, we're going to get you a free roof. Sign over this assignment of benefits document, and we will handle everything. You don't have to pay your deductible. And selling them that everything's stars and rainbows and sunshine. So what would happen is the contractors would go in, they would fix the roof or replace the roof, submit the claim to the insurance company. Insurance company would come out and inspect and said, hey, there's no damage because it's a brand new roof. We're denying the claim. Then they would have an attorney sue the insurance company, and that part would then exacerbate a claim. In Florida, we had what was called one-way attorney's fees, where if the home insurance carrier was sued by an attorney, they would also have to pay the attorney's fees. So you take maybe $100,000 roof, and now you have to multiply that by the attorneys or add the attorney's fees, and the attorney's fees could be a multiple of their actual fee. So it really increased the claims that the insurance companies did not account for, and that caused them to lose money. Many of them went out of business, even when prior to Hurricane Ian, because of this this scheme that was going on. Now, I'm not against assignment of benefits. I think it does serve a purpose, but when something is taken advantage of, the Florida legislature then did make changes to the laws that still do allow it, but there's certain protocols and things that have to be done. Now, I'm not saying the insurance companies are blameless in this, but it did affect the claims ratios. So some of that was fraud. Now, not all contractors and assignment of benefits agreements are bad. It's just it was a small percentage of the market that did affect the global picture. Then you have lawsuits. So a few years ago, Florida accounted for about 9% of all homeowners claims in the country, but about 80% of all lawsuits for homeowners claims across the country. So at some point that is a ratio that's got to give way. And the Florida legislature did make changes. We have seen a downturn in the number of lawsuits in Florida, so that's certainly been more helpful in reducing those claims. Then we have capacity to insure. So, an insurance company may set aside $1 billion to insure Florida, which then they buy reinsurance for that. And when the reinsurance rates go up, they're not going to eat those costs, so they do have to pass those on to the consumer. So insurance companies do buy reinsurance for catastrophes. So they may only be on the hook for a percentage of the loss, but their costs are increasing because they're having to buy that insurance. And then, of course, catastrophes, which we just talked about in the trivia question, is and the storm that's on its way to Florida right now. That's been a big driver of rates. If you look at your homeowner's policy for those who live in Florida, it does separate your premiums, your cost for hurricane or windstorm coverage, and your cost for homeowners coverage. And a lot of times that could be 50 to 80% of your overall premium. So these are some of the factors that really caused the insurance industry to kind of turn upside down in Florida. And they've been going on for a long time. Last year, there were a lot of changes made in the laws that helped bring down the number of assignment of benefits claims, fraud, and lawsuits. So we are starting to see changes in the market. So this just gives you not just catastrophes in Florida, but catastrophes across the country that do affect insurance because they also affect reinsurance. Just giving you, and this is from 2022, climate disasters going all the way from California to the Northeast, and then all the way down to Florida. And so I'll provide another one, talking about hurricanes in 2022. There are 8 hurricanes and 14 total storms. 4 hit the U.S. coastline. And then we talked about Hurricane Ian and wildfires. Actually, Florida does have wildfires, as well as California, Montana, Utah, a lot of those states as well. So all of these types of disasters do affect insurance premiums across the country and even, in our southeast area and Florida. So it just gives you a larger picture of the number of events that occur on a really on a daily basis, that we don't necessarily think about or know about. Just for example, in 2022, from a wildfire, there were 64,000 wildfires that burned 7.3 million acres. So, 64,000 wildfires is certainly a lot. And in states like California, their wildfire season is 9 months out of the year. But again, all of those do affect, the hurricanes in Florida do affect rates across the country.
So Scott, you paint thus far anyway, a very bleak picture. We're hearing hurricanes, we're hearing wildfires. I think you mentioned floods, earthquakes, which you didn't mention, but those exist too.
Yep.
There's a host of calamities that we're all facing, and apparently it's not unique to Florida or California. It seems to be based on the map from the preceding page. These are things that are nationwide, but I guess it's rising. It's causing a rise in premiums nationwide. So I think we're all facing it and being hit with it. But with that bleak picture that you just painted, is there anything positive that a homeowner can look forward to, or do we just resolve ourselves to this state of affairs?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So what we're seeing now is positive changes in the marketplace. As I mentioned, due to the Florida legislative changes, the number of lawsuits are down. Reductions in the AOB or assignment of benefits claims, and a crackdown on contractors. I mean, again, most contractors are good. It was a very small percentage. Some of them did lose their license. Some did also go to jail. So those changes have really helped the market. And what we're seeing the effects of that is there's an estimated 4 to 6 new insurance carriers, coming to Florida and writing new business. Some of them are already started. Some are starting in Q4. And we're seeing expansion of insurance carrier appetite, meaning their underwriting guidelines are becoming more flexible. And Citizens, which is the state-run insurance program, a lot of those private carriers are taking policies away from the state program. That's called depopulation, and that's a good thing. Yes, their Citizens is kind of supposed to be the last resort, but having too many policies in that program really can affect the state and how it runs from an insurance perspective, because at the end of the day, the backstop is the taxpayer of Florida. So really trying to get more insurance coverage in the private market is a positive thing. Yes, we're still seeing rate increases, but the percentage of rate increases are down, meaning instead of seeing 50 to 60% rate increases, maybe we're seeing 30%. Now, it's still, is a punch in the stomach sometimes to see that, but we have to start somewhere. We're not going to go from a 50% rate increase to a 20% decrease. We have to, work our way towards that. So we are seeing positive changes, and the consumer has become more educated. So we're seeing more people take measures to protect their house and prevent losses. And we can, talk about that as well. I'll go through some things, that homeowners can do.
And that is leading to the next question.
Okay.
So it looks like the insurance industry and supply demand economic factors are playing a role. The market is speaking, so to speak. But what can individuals start to do? Those who live here in Florida, and those who are considering a move either here or to in general a higher risk state, if you will.
Yeah. So if you're looking to move to Florida, or you have a current home here, it really is about being proactive. Preparing yourself for those increases. We've seen a lot of non-renewals in the state. I'm starting to see less non-renewals. We had a period of 2022 or 2022 and 2023 where we saw a lot of those. Now carriers still do that, and they still reserve the right to do that. But I think preparing yourself and understanding that that is a possibility is the first step. Looking at higher deductibles, as long as you have the means to do so, taking on a little more risk, understanding that maybe I'm not going to be taking a $1,000 deductible. And, if I have a $1,500 claim, submitting it for $500, looking at it and say, hey, let's use this as more as a catastrophic event than something for, if I have a broken stove or something like that. Discuss self-insuring on the windstorm coverage. So if you don't have a mortgage, you have flexibility. And if you have the means to do so, looking at, okay, what's my premium with wind coverage or hurricane coverage? What's my deductible? And, what am I willing to self-insure? Because sometimes when you get into the homes that are $5-10 million replacement costs, you could be looking at, $100,000 premiums plus a $500,000 deductible. And you say, okay, my home's newer, it's all concrete. Maybe I don't necessarily need this coverage because by the time I see a dollar, I'm, having to spend 600. Analyzing coverage. I'm not a big believer in reducing coverage, but analyzing coverage and making sure it's, efficient for you. And review policy credits, making sure that you're getting your alarm credits, your backup generators, your water leak detection systems, all, guard gate, community credits, all of those things on your policy. Two types of inspections that are very common and almost required are the windstorm inspection and the 4-point inspection. Now, the windstorm inspection is going to help reduce your cost. It's going to look at, your home roof design. Do you have impact windows or shutters? Is your home protected from a storm? And that's going to help you reduce cost. Your 4-point is mostly for homes 15 years and older. They're going to make sure it's more of a qualification document inspection, saying, has your AC been updated? So the 4 points are air conditioning, roof, electrical, and plumbing. Probably the 4 areas where we see most of the claims. So the insurance companies want to make sure, have you been maintaining the home? Is your roof updated? If it's a 1975 home and it's the original roof, it's probably at the end of its lifespan. So it's important to make sure that those are updated. So those will help you qualify for an insurance company, and that will certainly help you in your pricing because you have more, carriers at your disposal. And then I would say, values-based buying, really understanding am I shopping on price or am I looking for a carrier that's going to be there after a storm? If you have a claim, everyone expects you to have coverage, but understanding that, okay, if I just went with the least expensive option, my expectations might be kind of low. And that's not always the case, but making sure that, coverage and quality of carrier comes first, because there is a cost to that, just as buying a, Honda Accord versus a Mercedes. There are disparities in cost, but there's also disparities in what value you're getting there. Discussing your concerns aside from premium. Am I concerned about, the hurricane coverage? Am I concerned about water damage? There are a lot of carriers that are excluding or limiting water damage coverage. And water damage claims are the #1 claim other than catastrophes. So in the 20 years that I've been doing this, we've handled more water damage claims than hurricane claims. So things that we may not always, think about because windstorm is the driving factor in premium, but you may have another type of claim. And then choosing an agent that understands your concerns. If you're calling an agent saying, hey, I want the cheapest thing, at the end of the day, what value does that bring to you if there is a loss? What support are you going to get? What kind of carrier are you working with? So those are some of the things that, I would recommend, doing to help you. And then I think, continuing this, what drives rates and what helps decrease rates or premiums. Some additional components of that are older homes with limited updates, certainly increase premiums. If you have a home, let's say it's a secondary home in Florida, and then you rent it out on an Airbnb or a short-term basis, that could affect rate. Lack of windstorm protection. So if it's a home that doesn't have, uh, uh, let's say shutters or impact glass, that'll increase the cost. Frame construction in Florida definitely does, and coastal properties. Now we all want to live on the coast because that's why we come to Florida. But thinking if you're inland, the costs are going to be a little less than you are if you're right on the water. Now, things that will help if you're looking for a home in Florida, in 2002, we had the largest building code upgrades. So anything post 2002, you're going to get a better premium than pre 2002. Concrete construction, inland properties, um, impact glass or hurricane proof doors and windows. Now it doesn't matter if you have 100 windows and 89 are impact glass and 11 are shutters. That doesn't matter as long as all openings are protected into the Miami-Dade code. Hip roof, if you think about a pyramid where all sides of the pyramid angle upward, and that is essentially a hip roof, which will help deflect wind. A gable roof is kind of like a barn where you have two flat ends and then a peaked roof. So on the flat ends, that's where if the wind comes in, there's a lot of pressure on that wall. Water leak detection systems. So these are becoming more popular, where it's a system that's installed on the main water line coming into the home. And if you're not home, or if you're home and it's controlled by an app, it'll alert you if it detects a leak. If you don't respond, it'll shut the water off to the house. Or if you don't know what it is, you can shut off the water to the house. So I personally have one, and it's warned me of some leaks, but that's just kids, playing with the hose out back or something like that. So it does work. And then alarm systems with cellular backup, is something else that I think are more common than any of these, because most people are getting alarm systems. And then I think the overall advice that I would give is just seeking advocacy, guidance, and professional advice. Above all, working with a professional advisor will help you navigate this market. I think that's where, agents like myself, really understanding and working with the client. And there's a lot of great ones in, Florida and other areas. But really just working with someone you trust that's giving proper guidance, that can help guide you, because at the end of the day, yes, it is about getting the most efficient policy, but there's more to that after a claim, during a claim, and even, like what we're preparing for right now before this storm, things that a proper advisor can help you with. And I hope it wasn't, I think more people will probably have questions at this point. So we wanted to make sure there was plenty of time for all.
So yes, so Scott, whoops, I shut off my camera. Sorry about that. So Scott, thank you very much. That was very informative, and I'm glad that you closed out with some positives after some of the bleak factoids peppered in there. We do have some questions. So what I'd like to do at this time is open up the call and ask anyone who's been participating and listening to use the Q&A widget on your screen. If you do have any questions, please submit them. We have a few so far, and Scott, again, thank you. This really has been very informative. We hope this was helpful for everyone who called in, and we'll certainly welcome the opportunity to discuss these issues and anything of relevance, down the road. So,
yeah, absolutely. So it looks like we have a couple of questions that came in. It says, what type of advance notice does an insurance company have to provide for non-renewal of an existing home policy with windstorm? So in Florida, they have at least to give 120 days notice. So you do, they do have plenty of time, or they give you plenty of time. So the one thing I would recommend is once you get it, calling the existing agent or broker, speaking to them about it, and really having a plan. I don't necessarily recommend jumping ship at that point. However, it makes sense to do so. Obviously, you have to take that measure. But that's for all homeowners policies in Florida, whether you have windstorm coverage or not. And then a second question is talking about replacement costs, construction costs, increased values. Um, so yeah, replacement costs are important. So understanding that we're insuring to the construction value of the home, not the market value, um, not the taxable value, none of that. It's to the replacement cost. So what does it cost to rebuild this home at today's value? So those have gone up over the last several years. And most policies have a cost of living adjustment in there. So let's say the replacement value today is 2 million. The insurance company at the renewal is going to increase that by an inflation factor. So it could be 5% this year or 10% this year. We've seen obviously a influx as inflation rates have gone up, but on average it's been 5 to 6%. But in the past few years, it's been probably closer to 8 or 9%. So that's important. A lot of people will cut their coverages to save money, but I don't recommend that because if we do have a catastrophe, you could be paying on the back end for not having enough coverage. So it is recommended that those are evaluated, not necessarily on an annual basis, but every couple of years is what I recommend doing. Let's see.
Are there,
Okay. Yeah, or you want to go for it? Okay.
I was gonna say, are there areas in Florida that have especially high rates or any areas that might be a bargain, so to speak?
Yeah. So, I mean, in general, coastal, but Dade County, the Keys, a lot of the barrier islands that surround Florida, whether east or west coast, those tend to have higher rates. Versus let's say Orlando, um, Ocala, those areas will tend to have lower rates.
Then the next one we see is, are there any strategies you can recommend in the case of an insurance company requiring a new roof where the existing roof still has several years of useful life? And I personally have that situation as well, so I'd love to hear the answer.
Yeah, that can be a tricky one. There's no silver bullet for that. Um, I would say if you're looking at a useful life of anything under 5 years, a lot of insurance companies have become very picky with that. Um, there are some markets that are going to charge a higher premium, but they'll have more flexibility. Now, in Florida and in many and most other states, there's two types of carriers. There's admitted and there's non-admitted. Admitted carriers are like your Travelers, your Progressives, State Farms. They fall under more stringent guidelines from the state of Florida. They are backed by the Florida Insurance Guarantee Association Fund, which is similar to FDIC insurance with banks. And then there's surplus lines or non-admitted, which is like Lloyd's of London, and carriers like that. Going to those carriers will offer more flexibility. That's essentially why they were created, because they they don't have to get rate approval from Florida, so they can charge whatever rate they want. Now, obviously, they can't change it during the policy period, but they can certainly quote a rate, and they can increase rates at renewals without approval. But that is something that more and more people go to, that where maybe they have a roof that is towards the end of its useful life, and the other insurance companies have declined them. Yes, you're going to pay a higher cost for that, but it's less expensive than paying for a new roof right now. Working with a broker that has options other than maybe one or two carriers, that can potentially market it to other carriers. It's I've seen that a lot. We've experienced it, even with our own clients. It is a difficult situation. There's no magic answer, but I would definitely say, preparing for that, maybe having those inspections every couple of years, and knowing when my roof is going to be at the end of its life.
Great. So another question that just came in, does the insurance for condos differ from standalone properties?
Yeah, absolutely. So condos, you're insuring from the paint inwards, um, and post Champlain Towers. A lot of carriers have been more limited on condos and requiring more inspections. Obviously, that's even affected the associations and their rates over or their costs overall, especially for older condo buildings. The condo insurance market has become tougher. What we find in condos are water damage claims are the prominent losses. Because when you think if it's a 10-story building and there's a water leak on the ninth floor, where's that water going? It's going to the eighth, seventh, sixth, fifth, and so on. So we have seen a lot more, carriers taking rate with those. Um, We've even seen a lot more development of condo buildings, especially in downtown areas, which you've probably seen in West Palm, along the beach. Let's see, in Fort Lauderdale, obviously coastline are filled with condos. So it is a different insurance policy, still homeowners policy, but it is structured in a way where it's appropriate for condos.
Now, here's one that I'm sure has affected many people. The question just came in. So if you no longer have insurance coverage because your insurance company failed, left the state, and you can't currently get coverage, how likely are these new companies, you alluded to a few, that are coming into the market to cover the currently uninsured?
Yeah, so it depends on their guidelines. So some carriers will charge at a surcharge for not being insured prior. They sometimes look back 30 days, 15 days, or 45 days. So if you didn't have insurance during that time period, some make it ineligible for their product. Others will charge a fee for that or a surcharge, because they've found that some people don't buy insurance until they have something happen and they go buy insurance and then submit the claim. So it's happening. Um, but I think more carriers are going the surcharge rate route, versus, making them ineligible altogether. But you could expect, at least for the first year, to have, maybe a slightly higher rate. And then what you could potentially do is work with your broker at the renewal to, get that surcharge removed.
So, Scott, that it makes me think of a question as well, which also goes back into the material that you prepared.
Mhm.
You discussed, one of the steps someone can take to reduce perhaps their cost to self-insure for
Mhm.
wind mitigation.
Yep.
What about people, there's been such an influx of
Mhm.
people into the state and people just buying homes outright for cash. And a lot of the insurance discussion is driven by the mortgage and the mortgage company.
Mhm.
For people that may
Yeah.
own their homes outright, um, and they choose to self-insure not just wind mitigation, but everything. Is that wise, or what are the risks involved with that?
Yeah, I don't think that that's the wisest choice because, as I mentioned earlier, the other cause of loss, that the largest cause of loss, not from catastrophes, is water damage. We see a lot of that pipe burst, AC, the drain overflow, dishwasher leak, things like that. And then we talk about liability coverage. So in Florida and most other states, homeowners policies are comprehensive policies. So it's not just covering one or two things. It's covering your liability, it's covering your property. And so the liability is an important piece, especially for those means where they have to protect assets. Insurance, we can do all the estate planning and trust and LLCs and all of that stuff, but the first line of defense is insurance when it comes from a liability standpoint, a property standpoint. And then we talk about excess liability, because defense costs are included in that coverage. So I definitely recommend having a homeowner's policy because it is very comprehensive in scope and coverage. But extracting that hurricane portion or the windstorm portion will remove a majority of the cost. So I do think that that is a better strategy than completely self-insuring.
Thanks. That's come up. Here's a question that came in before the call. Someone has an insurance carrier that they currently have been using, they're moving to Florida. Should they continue with that carrier, or is it better to try to find a Florida specialist?
Yeah, it depends on who they're working with that carrier. If they're going direct to the carrier and that carrier is not, insuring in Florida, it's definitely recommended to finding someone who has expertise in Florida. If you're working with a broker, let's say a national firm or something like that, and they do have either colleagues and expertise or capabilities in Florida, I would drill down with them on that and make sure that they truly understand it. And if they do, great. Work with them because you have established relationship. If they don't, then definitely working with someone, whether that's working together or working individually with that person, meaning having let's say you live in Chicago and that broker only works in that area, but a good relationship and working with someone in Florida, that is good too. There's risk with that because the person in Chicago may forget to tell the person in Florida about something or vice versa. So it's good to have everyone on the same page. Or if you're moving to Florida as a primary, then certainly seeking the advice from someone who is established in Florida is probably the better of the two. But again, it's really about the relationship and their expertise. Because if you have multiple agents, that's when gaps in coverage occur and I forget to tell the person or I don't know who to contact, and then something goes uninsured, and Newton's law, that's where the loss is going to happen, and now you're stuck holding the bag. I definitely think working with someone in Florida is the better of the two, but again, it really comes after drilling down with the current person or team that you work with and making sure you understand their expertise.
Okay, so for someone that owns properties around the country, let's say, it's not uncommon to have, multiple entities, multiple agents, but it might be preferred if there's someone that has national scope and coverage and expertise to consolidate under one agent or provider.
Absolutely, yeah, because one, it's going to be ease of use for you as the consumer, and two, it's going to limit gaps in coverage. For me, I work with clients all over the country, but we have offices all over the country. So if I'm working with someone in California, I tap their expertise to work, help me with that client. Same with if they're in the Midwest, Northeast and whatnot. So, we are a national firm, so I'm able to then bring in those experts from those areas to help uh, you know, for the benefit of the client.
So, yeah, without really talking about specific underwriters and carriers, that's really not the purpose of the call. But there was a question that came in, someone asking specifically about Pure.
Mhm.
And seems like they seem to perhaps have specializations in certain markets. Is that true, or can you maybe, if you have knowledge of Pure,
Mhm.
discuss them a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Pure is a great carrier. We work a lot with them. I have many, many clients with them. They are a reciprocal exchange, so it's probably the close or the most well-known reciprocal exchange without knowing it's a reciprocal exchange is USAA. So they're a member-owned organization, so there is benefits to that. But yes, they're writing all across the country. They provide great solutions for clients. Are they the right solution for every client? No. We also have other carriers like Chubb, let's see, AIG, Berkeley One, Vault. Those are probably, and Cincinnati Insurance Company, those are probably the top five, six, what we'll call private client carriers. And then we have a lot of regional carriers from there because, insurance really is regionally, I guess, segmented because we're dealing with hurricanes here. California is dealing with wildfires and earthquakes, which is different than what they're dealing with in Illinois to Maine. So, working with large carriers is important, but then finding the carrier that is right for you is probably the most important. And Pure's got a great program, but it may not be the best for every other client, which is why other options exist.
So Scott, if someone is insured and then the insurance drops them, does the person have any recourse if against the insurance company if the insurance company drops them, from coverage?
Yeah, in some cases, yes. In most cases, not really. It depends on what the reason for non-renewal or cancellation is. If it's due to a roof or some type of hazard in the home, usually if the homeowner rectifies that situation, then they can get reinstated. If it's due to a reduction of windstorm capacity from an insurance carrier, there's not much that they can do. Those insurance carriers do have to get approval from the state of Florida in order to do that. So at that point, it's really to help that insurance company, maintain financial, positive financial status. So unfortunately, there's not many options that you can do. But again, if it is due to a specific item in that home, as long as it's rectified, usually the insurance company will reinstate.
So this is important, and this one I'm probably should have asked a little bit sooner. But someone, if they have a vacant residence or property in the state, how might that affect insurability and premiums? And maybe for someone who's a snowbird or part-time residents, again, is there any impact on the insurance?
I mean, there definitely is. Usually an insurance company will make a seasonal surcharge on a policy. So if they're 6 months in another state, another area, there is a surcharge to that. Some insurance companies require, let's say a caretaker to come check the property on a regular basis, which is important. Many condo buildings will have, as part of their management services, have someone checking on, those units where the residents are out. It's definitely important to have like a plan like that. But yes, vacant properties can cost more for coverage because if someone's not there on a regular basis and a water leak occurs or something occurs that causes a major loss, it may be a period of time where that loss continues. Whereas if a homeowner was there on a regular basis, they would catch it much sooner. So yes, I mean that can certainly affect rates. I do see one question just came in,
Mhm.
and sorry, Kenneth. It says you said the rate of increase is now declining. Do you see that trend continuing to stabilization? Now, yes, I have my fingers crossed, but there's a lot of factors that will change that. I do see eventual stabilization, but again, this storm that is brewing that's heading towards the state of Florida, those continue, then it may or will affect or prolong that stabilization time period. I do think the state of Florida does need to do more to help attract insurance companies to Florida, whether that be increasing the catastrophe fund or some there's many options that have been discussed. Whether they put those in place or not is beyond my pay grade right now. But I do see eventual stabilization. But if not, I mean, that could really affect. I mean, I know it has affected the real estate market, the construction market, et cetera. I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, but my crystal ball broke yesterday, so I wish I knew, but I do think we will see that.
I hope you have that insured.
Yeah, but
So, what if there's a change in ownership structure? Somebody owns their home, joint tenancy, let's say, and
yeah.
it moves into a trust or an LLC or something along those lines. Would that have any impact on the insurance?
It won't have an impact on the premium, but it can have an impact on the coverage. So it's important to, if you are in that estate planning process or recently have done or previously have done it, making sure that that entity or that whether it be an LLC or trust is added to the insurance policy in many cases as an additional insured, and obviously consult with your agent or broker on that. But one thing we find is when I'm doing reviews for prospective clients, we find that hey, we put the home in the trust last year. but it was never added to the insurance policy. So not necessarily from a property standpoint is that going to affect it, but from a liability standpoint, it can. And if it's an LLC, a lot of times the insurance company just wants to make sure that the LLC is not also making widgets in Wisconsin. They want to make sure that it's really for, estate planning purposes, privacy, etc., and not having other operations. So it is important to involve your insurance, person, before those documents are, meaning the deed is changed, so that they can, make sure that the insurance documents are updated.
Similar conversation we have with clients about beneficiary designations. It's
Yep. Yep.
need consistency. Um, we're now entering a period of interest rate reduction. So the rate environment is declining. Do you see that having any impact on insurance premiums?
It certainly can, because insurance companies have investments. As long as they're making, if the money that they're making on their investments increases, that will certainly help their bottom line. And the more that they make, the less that they would necessarily have to rely on premium. But it also, could cause a higher demand for new homes, whether that means construction companies getting loans and building, or new buyers, purchasing homes. So it can have effects on premiums. To what degree? It depends on how low interest rates go and how much new development is done and what the insurance companies are making on their investments. But yes, those are some of the factors that there's a lot that will affect rates, meaning premium rates.
So you mentioned your crystal ball a moment ago, which again, I'm glad to hear you had insured. What about people with, collectibles, valuables, artwork? What considerations, do they need to take to make sure their properties is properly insured?
Yeah, if you have things like jewelry, fine arts, things of that degree, I definitely recommend having a separate policy, a collections or jewelry policy for that. There are limitations on homeowners policies for contents for jewelry and fine art. There's limitation of theft coverage, and there's no mysterious disappearance under a homeowner's policy. Having a separate policy will, and you want to make sure, that it is with your broker, that it does include this, but mysterious disappearance is generally covered, as well as theft of those items. And from my experience, the number one cause of loss is mysterious disappearance, where you may have been playing golf, you may have been traveling, and you look down on your wrist and you realize, oh man, my watch is not there, and I might have left it at the hotel. And when you call the hotel, of course, it's not there. Or, wearing a diamond ring, put it on in the morning, going about your day, come home, the ring's on your finger, but the diamond is missing. Those are examples of mysterious disappearance. And that's where most of, I've seen the claims from my clients. And that is not covered under a homeowner's policy under the contents coverage. So definitely getting coverage for that separately or as a rider on the policy is important.
Okay, so it could be a rider or a separate policy.
Correct.
In the material, you had mentioned, discuss the assignment of benefits, that whole fiasco. Is that unique to Florida, or is that a common around the country?
No, it's common around the country, because it gives the homeowner, the insured, flexibility. It was taken advantage of in Florida, so we saw more use. Now, other states may have different restrictions, but it is, in many cases it is available to homeowners. Some states may outlaw it completely, as insurance is regulated per state. So the varying laws and differences, are affected per state.
Great. And last question, unless anything else comes in, you mentioned that we're starting to see some legislative change in Florida. So similar to the question about the stabilization or the trends of premiums coming down, is the legislative changes that have been taking place, do you feel they're one and done, or do you think it's the start of a trend of more favorable legislation for the consumer?
I mean, I hope it's a trend. I don't, I mean, there's not just one situation because it's an ever evolving industry, especially as, climate change does occur, um, because we're seeing more storms, catastrophes, etc. My hope is that it's ever changing. It does take time to see the effects of those changes. So there may be a lag in when the next major change is because we have to evaluate those changes that were done. Uh, but it is definitely, in my opinion, ever changing and will continue because what we've experienced 20, 30 years ago are very different than what we're experiencing now.
Well, seeing no more questions having come in and addressing the ones that came in before the call, there's 3 minutes left before we end. So I would encourage everyone to dust off their homeowners insurance policies, make sure you're up to date and current. And but most of all, Scott, thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time to share this information with us. It's been really informative. For all of you who called in, we hope this was helpful. Always welcoming the opportunity to discuss topics of relevance with you, with our clients. And thank you all for attending. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon and hope to see you all soon.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Scott.